As a connoisseur of football, I developed preferences for game commentators based on no logical or rational reason. I guess it was more of an emotional process determined by whoever appealed to my personal prejudice and biases. Those prejudices and biases didn't necessarily have anything to do with football and probably say more about me than the people I like or don't like to listen to while watching a game. So for many years, I did not like Joe Buck. No real reason. I've tried to analyze it in hindsight. Maybe I resented his professional success. I wish I could sit around and talk about football plays and get paid for it. Sort of like preaching. Work one day a week. Maybe it was just that I unconsciously knew that he was 10 years younger than me and didn't like to have to listen to someone younger than me. Who knows? There was no reason to dislike Joe Buck, but I didn't like him. This all changed in December of 2017 when I read an article on Chris Long in the Washington Post sports section. Chris Long was playing for the Philadelphia Eagles that season, and he had played for the University of Virginia. I had seen him in person when UVA played Virginia Tech, and I had a soft spot in my heart for him since I had watched his father, Howie Long, when he played for the Oakland Raiders. Now again, no rational reason why I liked Howie and Chris Long. Just an emotional sort of thing. But when I saw the article, I was interested in learning more. I learned that Chris Long gave away a lot of his money, and that only increased my positive impressions of him. The article related how Chris Long had been impacted by the events of Charlottesville earlier that year and had given his first 6 game checks to educational programs in and around Charlottesville. He gave his other 10 paychecks that season to similar efforts in St. Louis, Boston, and Philadelphia, the 3 cities where he had played professionally. In other words, Chris Long wasn't taking home a dime that season, and his whole motivation for playing was to help others. The article went on to recount Long's efforts in Africa, where he has given significant sums of money to build wells to provide people with clean water. This is where Joe Buck comes into the picture and forever made me a fan of Joe Buck. The article told how Chris Long had traveled to Tanzania to climb Mount Kilimanjaro with his friend James Hall, a former teammate with the Rams. The article related on their final night, Long was having drinks with Hall at the hotel bar, celebrating the conclusion of their trip, when he heard a voice yell, "Hey, Chris." He turned and saw broadcaster Joe Buck, whom he knew from St. Louis and because Buck worked at Fox with his dad. Buck had traveled to Tanzania with Brad Pitt's brother Doug, also a St. Louis native, to work on a clean water project. They encouraged Long to join. "We're halfway around the world," Long said. "I'm like Who is this guy that looks like Brad Pitt? And why is Joe Buck in the bar? And what the hell is going on? The random encounter would shape part of Long's life. The article goes on to relate, as Buck's invitation stayed with him, Long studied the impact clean water could have. He called his mother at 2 a.m. and shared ideas. The more he studied it, the more he realized what a catalyzing force clean water could be. Fewer hospital beds required to treat waterborne illnesses would mean better health care. If women and girls didn't need to trek alone to reach potable water, they would face less risk of sexual assault. Long started his foundation and launched an initiative called Water Boys. As of December, now this is 2017, Water Boys has raised $1.7 million, served 100,000 people, and seen to the building of 30 wells in Tanzania. Now, I've been preaching for nearly 35 years and have not gotten anywhere close to that kind of effectiveness. I only wish Joe Buck continued success and say that I was totally wrong and have the greatest of respect for him. Now, I started with that somewhat protracted opening sermon illustration because I think it illustrates our reading from Proverbs this morning. We are told to start children off the right way, the way they should go, and then warned about how the rich rule over the poor and the borrower is a slave to the lender, which for those of us profiting in the financial sectors of our economy is something we would prefer to ignore. The word of hope comes with the observation that the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. I read the text as teaching that thing Jesus said about from everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one to whom much has been entrusted, much more will be asked. Unfortunately, there's a lot in the Bible about the matter of money, and there are many biblical passages that can be summarized as, show me the money. I suppose this is because nowhere else do we more accurately reflect what we really believe than in the way that we manage money. Or it may be more accurate to say how money manages us. Money has a way of cutting to the chase. Now, before you accuse me of trying to manipulate you to get more money for Messiah, let me go ahead and acknowledge that's exactly what I'm doing. I think Messiah is a pretty good use of my money. But then again, it wasn't my money to start with. It was your money at one point. But then again, it wasn't your money to start with. Money is simply a tool with which we can either do something good or do damage to ourselves. As such, the real issue is the state of our souls, which is why Jesus said that bit about what good will it be for you to gain the whole world, yet forfeit your soul. There was another article in the Washington Post in 2017 that recalled some of the wisdom in the biblical text as it relates to money. It was written by two academics from the University of Virginia, Charles Matthews and Evan Sandsmark, both in the religious studies department there. It's entitled, "Being Rich Wrecks Your Soul." We used to know that. They recount the ancient wisdom of many cultures that had great suspicion around the accumulation of great riches. They write, the point is not necessarily that wealth is intrinsically and everywhere evil, but that it's dangerous, that it should be eyed with caution and suspicion, and definitely not pursued as an end in itself, that great riches pose great risk to their owners, and that societies are right to stigmatize the storing up of untold wealth. They go on to recount, over the past few years, a pile of studies from the behavioral sciences has appeared, and they all say, more or less, being rich is really bad for you. Wealth, it turns out, leads to behavioral and psychological maladies. The rich act and think in misdirected ways. When it comes to a broad range of vices, the rich outperform everyone else. They are much more likely than the rest of humanity to shop and shoplift and cheat, for example. And they are more apt to be adulterers and drink a great deal. They are even more likely to take candy that is meant for children. Studies have shown that people who drive expensive cars are more prone to run stop signs and cut off other motorists. Then the article recounts what concerns religious hacks like me. Matthews and Sandsmark share, they also give proportionately less to charity. The article concludes, but it's time to put the apologists for plutocracy back on the defensive where they belong, not least for their own sake. After all, the Buddha, Aristotle, Jesus, the Quran, Jimmy Stewart, Pope Francis, and now even science all agree. If you're wealthy and reading this, give away your money as fast as you can. It's my impression that we are teaching our children here at Messiah this important lesson of our faith. You may remember that some months ago I shared a note with you that I had received from one of the children here at Messiah. It was so important that I've kept the note. Now I want to share it with you once again. Remember that it came totally unsolicited. I didn't ask the kids to do something like this. It simply reads, Pastor Reggie, I had a lemonade stand and I earned $10 for mission and outreach. The $10 was enclosed in the envelope, and it was signed from Bailey. Now, I can preach all day long about giving, but I think this act captures the essence of our scripture reading from Proverbs this morning. In the email sent by the church on Thursday, I recounted the response of the congregation last spring when I asked people to give feedback on their views regarding human sexuality. I was blown away by how many people responded in such a short time. While I value your views on human sexuality, I know that the biblical text is much more concerned with the way we use our money. A simple comparison of verses in the Bible on the two subjects will reveal that money wins hands down. So for the first time in my ministry, I'm going to encourage you to take out your cell phones and go to our church website, www.messiahumc.org, and scroll down to the moving windows in the lower part of the opening page. You can select the window that reads, Give with gratitude, and make your estimate of giving. When I was trying to think of a title for the sermon, I didn't realize that the saying, show me the money, was first used in the movie Jerry Maguire. I would have sworn that it's in the Bible. I saw Joe Buck on the broadcast of the football game on Thursday night. He was in Minnesota. Then he was one of the commentators on Friday and last night for the World Series. That guy gets around. I have such respect for him.